much. I want to thank everyone in attendance today. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here with us. I'm really excited to talk about the Master Workplace Investigations, which is an introductory to the overview of the 2-hour online seminar for professionals. We have a lot of information. I'm hoping you have time to jot down your questions, because this masterclass is going to be at least a training that you can take advantage of and learn a skill. So let's move on. Now, most of you have been part of presentations in the past, but if you haven't, this slide is a legal disclaimer indicating that we're not attorneys and we don't provide legal advice. In fact, the information provided is based on years of experience as being a compliance officer in the corporate sector and now a compliance advisor in the private sector. All of the information is for your training and knowledge experience. Today, we're going to cover, at least provide an overview that will be helpful in you determining that this training that is scheduled for March 25th is going to be key in your career scope. We're going to talk about understanding workplace investigations, and that goes beyond harassment. We need to also understand that it includes other types of investigations in the workplace: theft, safety violations, retaliation, and more. We're going to look at the role of HR, management, and even external investigators in the process. We're going to look at the best practices of the investigation process, making sure you understand the timeline of an investigation. There's also going to be certain components that are going to be critical in enhancing your investigation and getting a good result outcome. We're going to look about of key considerations before you start an investigation. We're going to look at, is it a formal approach or informal approach, depending on the nature of the allegations and the complaint. We're going to look at the need also to have as partners legal counsel, just to make sure that you are providing all the information that you need, and also that it will withstand legal scrutiny. The interview, one of the most critical components of workplace investigations. There could be strategies, there could be do's and don'ts, which, by the way, I love. And there is many, and there are many tools that you can use when you attend the 2-hour webinar. Documentation is key. And in fact, what's important is, does it meet and withstand litigation? Now, litigation is one route that can, be part of an investigation, okay? Or if your compliance ducks are not in a row, it certainly could be, okay, your liability. So you want to make sure that you're providing everything that you have, including legal and ethical compliance. What's understandable, and sometimes it is underscored, is the term confidentiality, okay? Because you can't offer 100% guarantee of confidentiality, because it should be based on legal standards of state, federal regulations. Okay, not only that, if you're not conducting an investigation appropriately, that there are defamation risks. Evidence collection is also something that has to be prepared. One of the major factors that I want to get to is that you should have an investigation policy. Some of you already do. And when we look at some of those components, you're going to see if your policy meets the guidelines. So I do want to share with you what else you'll get from the 2-hour training. You're going to get a certificate. 2 hours is a substantial time to create a skill. If you're HR, okay, you're going to have certifications. Also, you, once you let your leadership know that you've attended the 2 hour, webinar, you not only have the skill, but you have the confidence of your leadership, letting them know that this is something that you took seriously. It also is a first line of defense. Yes, the 2 hour training is a way of having compliance efforts in the workplace. So let's just talk a little bit about my background, because most of the times you're really going to want to know the background of your trainer. And I like sharing it because it is, something that should make you feel confident of the information. Okay. I am an HR compliance advisor. Okay. And I was formerly a compliance officer in the corporate sector, as I mentioned before. I've conducted HR workplace investigations for several companies, and those for topics like sexual workplace harassment, discrimination, wrongful termination, hostile workplace, and other workplace violations. I'm certified as a workplace investigator, and I've provided training for HR professionals and other professionals on the investigation process and also compliance. My philosophy is that investigations should be consistent, documented, and factual, no matter what training modality you're using. Another thing that I wanted to share with you is I also have a philosophy. Not all HR should be the only investigation, the investigators. Now, this is a focus on that. So hopefully, if you're HR, this is going to really pique your interest. Okay. But if you follow protocols, if you have character, integrity, if you have the skills based on training, you can be an effective investigator. So don't let anyone tell you it's only HR. I've trained professionals that had no HR experience, but had some of the characteristics of a good investigator. So once we start talking about this, this is the sneak peek of the comprehensive workplace investigation sessions. Now, this session is going to provide high-level overview of the key concepts and critical skills covered in the main webinar. So that's going to be an enhancement of information. We're designed to empower HR professionals, managers, leaders, okay? And the main session dives deep into the best practices for investigating workplace misconduct, including harassment, theft, retaliation, and all the other topics that we shared with you before. You're going to learn how to conduct fair and impartial investigations. You're going to learn how to create documents that will meet legal scrutiny. You're also going to decrease your company's liability and have a positive work environment. A lot of investigations include staff morale issues, but utilizing this training model that you're going to learn when you attend, you're going to be able to at least identify all the factors that you need to have to really enhance your skills, protect your organization, and be fair. Now, this is a must-attend event. Now, just to make sure I remind you, make sure you ask your questions, okay, about the Master Workplace Investigation Seminar at the end of the webinar. I'm going to stick around as long as you need me, okay, to make sure that I can answer all of your questions. Now, we have to start by understanding the workplace investigation process. And as a workplace investigator, I wanted to attend the trainings that would provide me with the most effective skills. Starting as an HR professional, I was a sponge about workplace investigations, training, and to be as prepared as possible and follow effective procedures. And what I learned is that many other professionals can learn how to conduct workplace investigations as long as they follow research proven guidelines and training. In the masterclass, you're going to learn several things. You're going to learn the hands-on process for conducting workplace investigations. You're going to receive concrete instructions on how to conduct an effective workplace investigation. You're going to let your leadership know that you have the experience to conduct an effective investigation that allows them to be confident in what you've learned. You can earn the trust of your team and employees that you have the skills and resources to be an investigator. Receive free compliance tools when you attend. Okay. Use your certificate to demonstrate the knowledge you've received when you attend the 2-hour master workplace investigations. For HR professionals, you're going to receive 2 HR certification credits when you attend the Master Workplace Investigation Seminar. Now, why do you need an HR investigation process? Well, you need a work plan. You need to have all the elements before you're surprised about an investigation. Now, every workplace investigation will be distinctive in its facts, circumstances. However, your organization should follow general guidelines to help mitigate damage, okay, and protect positive workplace. HR investigations play an essential role in resolving conflicts at work. An organization needs HR investigation process before something occurs, not afterwards. And it's essential that you would educate your staff on making formal and informal complaints in your organization. Empower them to do so if a time comes that they need to. And if conducted properly, investigations can help protect the business interest by identifying misbehaviors, supporting an employee with fair, unbiased, and knowledgeable decision making, all key elements to an investigation. Finally, being able to conduct thorough investigations helps your organization protect itself from lawsuits. Okay. And it's not only lawsuits, it's also out of court settlements, which is also something that could impact your company. You're going to learn about guidelines. Now, understanding workplace investigations. Now, that's beyond harassment. Exploring other forms of misconduct. We talked about theft, safety violations, retaliation, but it also should be wrongful terminations. Also, it is sexual harassment, violence in the workplace, all of those. In fact, many of you already have in your company a list of those infractions that are prohibited. And that list may not be exhaustive, but it should really reflect how your company manages behavior issues. Okay. And the role of HR and management and external investigators in the process, because you may have more than one, which I also not only recommend, it's best practice. Don't do it all yourself. Even if you're an HR of one, you have management. You're going to need to be part of that process. You also may, decide based on your situation on having external investigators. That's your call based on several, situations, which the seminar will identify. You have to balance compliance, documentation with rapport building and sensitivity. You need to also create You're going to learn best practices before starting investigation. You need to find whether a formal or informal approach is required. And how do you determine that? It depends on the infraction. And something I train all my HR um, clients and managers, okay, is identify the issue. And I tell them the punishment has to fit the crime. Okay. And that, to me is a good best practice. But you need to have those assessments in place. You need to conduct effective interviews. We talked about that. Interviewing, okay, the accused. Also, witnesses, you have to manage uncooperative participants and reduce stress during interviews. In fact, many of the highlights you're going to learn is, and one of them is, how do you conduct an investigation when you have a relationship with either the accused, okay, or the victim? What ends up happening? Okay, because what we need to at least be aware of is, the perception of a conflict, which you may be able to conduct a very unbiased, investigation. But if people think that based on your relationship with that employee, it's going to change your focus, you're going to have to be aware and deal with those things. That happens, and it's not unusual. Documentation, documentation, and documentation. You're going to learn the most effective documentation process for you to be able to create a report that meets the criteria that will meet also the scrutiny of legal counsel. There's critical elements of the Master Workplace Investigation Seminar, okay? Legal and ethical compliance, and we talked about that. And why should you attend? Really, not only gain insights to the best practices, it gives you skill to be impartial. Okay? There's also credibility, recognizing deception, gathering evidence, okay? Evidence where you might not be aware. For example, I worked in defense contracting for many years, and on site there were surveillance cameras everywhere. Well, you need to be aware of, are you able to utilize the surveillance based on federal or state regulations? Okay. In most cases, for me, I was able to use the surveillance because it belonged to the company. So those are certain things you're gonna really learn about. The types of investigations, I mentioned some of them. Now, in many states, require an extensive investigation process and even specific complaint forms, like California and others, okay, which you need to be aware of. Because especially with remote employees, the state may supersede the federal, believe it or not. And in California, not only do you have to have a process, you have to have a special complaint form. In this respect, consistency is key. You need to be aware of what is requested of you. Okay. And my uh, best practices, be consistent with your forms. You can create one. Some of you, if you're part of HR associations, they provide templates for you to utilize. Make sure you're consistent with it, because if you're not, that's going to be a red flag, to defense counsel on how inconsistent you are. Okay. Now, with all of these requirements, it's easy to see how many professionals can be confused about best practices. Okay. But that is what what the seminar is going to teach you. Now, as I mentioned, you need to at least understand what the factors of these complaints are. And not every office scuffle or misunderstanding warrants a formal workplace investigation, especially if the complainant and the respondent agree on what happened. And in many cases, the problem can be resolved through a simple conversation with the offending employee. For example, if the situation appears to be mainly a personality conflict, rudeness, misunderstanding, okay, rather than a serious wrongdoing, you might decide you don't need to formally investigate. But identifying those factors is really key. Okay. An informal approach could be best if it's matter of miscommunication or misunderstanding of words that are spoken or company policy. I mean, do you need to gather more facts from other employees or relevant documents? If you're not sure, it's better to conduct a formal investigation immediately. And if the problem turns out to be more severe than anticipated, failing to investigate can cause legal problems and continue workplace problems that interfere with productivity. Often you can't recognize how widespread a substantial problem is until you ask enough questions and enough employees. Employee complaints. Now, as a human resources professional or professionals responsible for employee relations, it is probably the phone call or office visit that HR dreads the most. Okay. And when an employee calls to allege serious misconduct by a coworker, workplace investigations certainly follow. And today's fast paced business world, where employees are increasingly aware of their rights and employers are under constant scrutiny. In fact, one of the best practices that you're going to learn in the 2 hour seminar is when do you conduct the investigation? Don't let anyone tell you, wait 2 weeks, that would be efficient. In my compliance perspective, it needs to be done immediately. Now, let me tell you a little bit what immediately is between 24 and 48 hours, especially if you find out on a Friday that there is a complaint. That should start, okay, your calendar. That means that by Monday, you would have already had and reviewed your plan of what you're going to do next. Okay. Many times, because, most HR professionals just, continue to work, I do prepare the night before to make sure I have whatever information I need to have by the time I go into the office. Okay. Also, okay, if you wait too long, that's a red flag. Gonna, the seminar has several fatal mistakes that you should avoid and red flags that you should be aware of. Okay? And so you need to have it. The guidance of this training that you're going to attend is going to give you the structure you need, a skill that not many people have, but you will have it, which is a really effective way to increase, how people trust you. Okay, that's important. And just to let you know that there may be times where there's office gossip. It's everywhere. Okay. You already know, or employees already know, who can be trusted with information or not. I'm going to give you an example in a few minutes of how that worked out for one of my VPs that, that really shared information prematurely. What employers should do when they receive a complaint? First of all, you should be aware of the federal regulatory agencies. Of course, I always share state also, okay? But the federal regulations, like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the enforcement arm of Title VII, of the Civil Rights Act, the American with Disabilities Act, Age Discrimination Employment Act, Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, Sarbanes-Oxley Act for financial issues, okay, and discrimination laws in state and federal. You need to be, as an HR professional, this is part of your role and your obligation. So knowing that, and the most effective thing is when you connect and you subscribe to these regulatory agencies' website. They have tons of tools to help guide you. Okay, you don't have to start from scratch. You can already understand what it is. EEOC has several guidance FAQs that you can use to develop your skills and start them. So when you attend this 2-hour seminar, you can enhance your skills. You need to provide interim protection to both the person who accused and the victim. Now, it may mean that, depending on the allegation, that you have to do things immediately. You know, for example, move of the victim from the area of where the accuser is. Okay, change, transfer, leave of absence may be necessary. But let me remind you, don't jump to leave of absence unless you discuss it with the employee, the aggrieved employee, because they're going to think that they're being punished. Okay. And you want to make sure that they're part of the process. It could be that some of these actions could appear to be retaliatory, okay, which is going to result in a retaliation claim. I mentioned before the EEOC is the enforcement arm of for candidates and employees against discrimination, but they also monitor retaliation in the workplace as well. When you're selecting an investigator, you need to have the following skill set and characteristics: an ability to investigate objectively without bias, no stake in the outcome. Okay, for example, if you're the supervisor of one of these employees that are coming to you, you need to recuse yourself because there could be, as I mentioned before, the perception, of a conflict. You need to have skills that include prior investigative knowledge or definitely the working knowledge of employment laws, strong interpersonal skills, the ability to also be fair. Do people trust you? Attention to detail, and you need to have the right temperament to conduct those interviews. Many of us know that there are many people in our organizations that don't have these factors. Okay, and so it's easy to then have negative perspectives about it. So that means selecting the investigator is key. Who should conduct the investigation? Most, if there is a common choice, and there is HR is the most common choice. However, okay, remember I mentioned, okay, it should also include specialized job training. Okay, most of the HR professionals, okay, like me, who are certified, already have taken those types of trainings, or at least it's an introductory training, and you have the ability to get more training. That's what this master class is all about. Okay, remember impartiality. Okay, remember also that a disadvantage is that employees may associate the HR representatives too closely with the organization. Okay, unless they've developed a reputation in the workplace of being unbiased. There are certain qualities of an effective investigator. Okay, fairness, confidentiality, Okay, remember I mentioned that one of my VP colleagues, when I was working as an HR executive for Girl Scouts, we had a discussion with the executive director on staff reduction, which is not an easy topic to discuss because nobody wants to terminate anyone. Okay. As a result, there was a decision made, and every department put in who they thought, you know, would be on that list, even though they didn't agree with the process. Well, that VP shared the information with others. As a result, or before that, okay, the executive director changed her mind about whoever that VP had on the chopping block. And then when that VP and everyone else who knew about it, because she had spread it around, saw that same employee still at the work site, obviously trust was a huge factor. Also, there are pros and cons to third-party investigators. Okay, you learn those. It does really determine what is happening in your workplace at the time. It is your call. Does your company have a workplace investigation policy? We're going to give you that step-by-step approach, and we may even share with you the example of a good policy. And we should understand that what is included in a policy is purpose, a disclaimer, like kind of the disclaimer I used in this training, the policy itself, the procedures, the responsibility. There are certain situations to be investigated. Okay, and the following list is not all inclusive. However, it should give you an overview of what it is. And we talked about some of those factors before. I love do's and don'ts, and you are too. I am a visual learner too. As you notice in my slides, you're going to have graphics and you're going to have checklists, because that those are, for many learners, bullet points do more than narratives. Okay. And so here's just a couple of do's and don'ts. The seminar is going to have an extensive list of do's and don'ts. What categories can HR investigate in the workplace? Just to let you know, 44% of people polled had experienced harassment at work, yet only half of them reported it. So obviously, there's going to be many things that are not reported. And you have to make sure. And remember, we talked a little bit about gossiping, spreading lies that certain people may do, which, by the way, is illegal. It's defamation if you're spreading lies. Okay. And gossiping doesn't help anyone. And remember also, the investigations can include virtual meetings, phone calls, social media interaction, remote workplace, okay, as we expand. In terms of the questions, and at this particular time, I know we're a little bit over the time, but we started 10 minutes late, okay? So we're going to at least let you know that there are many benefits to really attending this master class. Some of the examples of what to include is included in this slide, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. AI in the workplace, investigations, pros, cons, tools to consider. Okay. Now, there's a lot of concerns about AI in the workplace, especially with workplace investigations. Some of you are familiar with artificial intelligence, but there are certain concerns, especially when it comes to a workplace investigation. Security, okay? Bias, okay? If you use the AI as a tool, that's okay, okay? Because it could save you some time. You need to always have the human element. And without that, your report could be at risk. And at this particular time, okay, we want to see if you've got any questions. Okay, I also want to remind you to please go and go onto the website, get into your particular webinar for the 2-hour online seminar. Sign up. It's going to really be valuable, and you get a lot more than what you pay for. So at this time, I do want to respect everyone's time. Sam, I am going to turn it over to you to see if you have a list of any questions. I also want to be conscious of the time, not to keep everybody longer. And so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hey Margie, thank you so much for this promo webinar and giving the overview for the main webinar that we're going to have on 25th of March. So attendees, and now we are open for a Q&A. If you have any doubt, any question related to the main webinar, or want to understand more about the topic, you can just use the raise hand option, question box or a chat box, and I will open the line for you. And Margie, meanwhile, if you see any question in your chat box or a question box, please go ahead and answer them.
Absolutely. In fact, while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, I do have a chat question. The chat question is, what are the major concerns with investigations, by external resources? And that's a good question. You use external resources like other compliance professionals. Sometimes legal counsel is the external. And so it really does depend on what's happening in your workplace. For example, if you're currently involved in a litigation about any violations, you're going to want to make sure that you have someone who could jump right in and be able to conduct an investigation. If it is a small company where everyone knows each other for years, you might want to have an external investigator, okay, because everyone knows each other and there's going to be concerns with conflict of interest. Okay. Also, if it is significant enough, okay, where you may be sued, which I always say anyone can sue, okay, you may want an external, investigation. But that's a good question. Sam, I have another one here. Okay, how do you feel about non-HR professionals, you know, um, being an investigator? I think I mentioned that before. You need to have some of those qualities. Yes, HR professionals do have most of those qualities, but I've trained professionals, managers, other professionals other than HR with the skill set that I trained them with. They were able to conduct effective and actually exemplary investigations. Okay, so don't let that be the thing that stops you. If you're not HR, you can do a couple of things. Go and see if you get more training, HR training. Okay, but if you're not HR, go to the regulatory websites, attend trainings like the one you're going to have on the 25th, the Master Workplace Investigations. Get your certificate, have your knowledge, okay? And I'm sure that you're going to do well. I do know that as an HR professional and a compliance professional, I do have faith in a lot of HR professionals, okay? But I really have learned that managers and supervisors and leaders and professionals with the same characteristics and training can be really phenomenal investigators. So both very good questions.